And we are live. And people are jumping on. Richard, thank you so much for joining me for the second time in 2 weeks. As I think everyone knows, Richard was the White House ethics lawyer under George W. Bush. And he is my go-to person for when we have ethical legal issues, which we have a lot under the Trump administrations. The issue of the day is this plane from Qatar. And I'm just going to say, Richard, that this afternoon my phone has been ringing and ringing because I think some of the facts around this plane are not yet clear. So it was reported by ABC News that the Qataris were gifting a plane that Trump would use as Air Force One. And we can get into why that is, because the Boeing is late and got problems delivering the US-made Air Force One. But the idea that was reported was that the Qataris were gifting Trump this plane. He was going to use it as the Air Force One plane, and then he was going to put it into the Trump Presidential Library Foundation and use it. It was reported he'd be using it for his personal use, and that sources, we don't know which sources, said that Pam Bondi had said that this was legally permissible. What I have heard this afternoon that is different and coming from the Qataris is, I'm going to read it so people understand. Reports that a jet is being gifted by Qatar to the United States government during the upcoming visit of President Trump are inaccurate. The possible transfer of an aircraft for temporary use as Air Force One is currently under consideration between Qatar's Ministry of Defense and the U.S. Department of Defense, but the matter remains under review by the respective legal departments and no decision has been made, said Ali Al-Ansari, Qatar's media attaché to the U.S. So what I'm hearing is that the Qataris believe that this would be a government-to-government deal, and that there's nothing in these negotiations about a personal gift to President Trump or to his library. Okay. If this is correct, if this is a government-to-government negotiation, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, the question is whether the Department of Defense, the Air Force, has the authority from Congress to receive a gift of an aircraft or temporary use of an aircraft from a foreign nation. And that would have to be addressed. And then this discussion of the aircraft going to the presidential library and all this rhetoric, I gather, would simply not be true. And we would focus on this as a gift from one government to the other. We do give military or loan military equipment to foreign countries, and Congress may very well authorize the Defense Department to do that. I have to say it's somewhat humiliating for the United States to not be able to provide its own airplane for the President of the United States. And I would think that the plane that President Biden used for 4 years is good enough. And I don't understand why there's such an emergency here that we would have to get the airplane from the Qataris.
Right. So let's just go to scenario number one. And I will note that President Trump hasn't, I think, publicly, as far as I've seen anywhere, addressed this issue of whether it's supposed to be for his personal use after he's left office. I mean, obviously, were that to be the case, there are all sorts of problems, right, Richard?
Absolutely. If there were a gift from a foreign government of a 747 worth several $100 million to the president of the United States that he simply received without consent of Congress, that would be a flat out violation of the Emoluments Clause of the Constitution. He can't do that.
He can't do that, right? I mean, the wording is very clear, right? He has to go to Congress. He would have to get a congressional sign-off, right? And he's getting criticism, not just from the Democrats, but he's actually getting criticism. Politico's reporting from the MAGA wing, from Laura Loomer, who is an activist he listens to because she doesn't agree with the way Hamas and Qatar, she doesn't agree with their policies. I mean, added into this, right, is the complication that he is headed to the Middle East this week. He is, going to visit Saudi Arabia and Dubai and Qatar. So what are the potential problems there when it comes to, negotiations in the Middle East and foreign policy?
Well, the president of the United States, if he's visiting the Middle East, should be seeking to resolve the conflict in the Middle East and to persuade Qatar to put pressure on Hamas to make peace with Israel. And that's not what Qatar's been doing for a decade. They've been supporting Hamas with over $1 billion worth of financial assistance that supposedly was to go to help the civilian population of Gaza, but a lot of money was spent building tunnels and rocket launchers. And then we have the present war in which 50,000 or more Gazans have been killed. We have many killed on the Israeli side as well. I would think we would want to negotiate for peace and persuade Qatar to participate in peace negotiations in good faith rather than fund a terrorist organization. We don't need to get a new airplane out of this deal. And it's somewhat shocking that that would be the priority of either the Qatari government or the White House.
Well, obviously, there are questions. We don't really know how these discussions even begun, right? What the New York Times reported was that when Trump was at Mar-a-Lago, he paid this plane was parked in Palm Beach in February. We don't know why, and that Trump went and toured the aircraft, and thought it was terrific. I mean, presumably, no matter how terrific this plane is, and we've read all sorts of, I'm sure it's a, palace in the air. The security requirements to kit it out to make it safe for the American president would surely take months and months to install. Am I wrong?
I would think it would take quite a long time to install the communications equipment you need, the security equipment to make sure that the plane doesn't have any problems with it, and to receive the plane from a foreign government that is to be used to transport the president of the United States is somewhat shocking that the United States would agree to this type of arrangement with any foreign government. Uh, After 9/11, when George W. Bush was told about the attacks, the first thing they did was drive him to that plane and put him up in the air because that's where he's safest, is up in the air. You don't want to have a terrorist attack that would kill the president. But would you really want to put the president up in the air after a terrorist attack in a plane that was provided to the United States government by a country that has supplied over $1 billion worth of financial aid to Hamas, a terrorist organization? This entire business makes absolutely no sense. And once again, I think the United States is a world power. We could provide our own airplane for the president of the United States. We have an Air Force One. It's perfectly good. It was used by President Biden for 4 years. And that is the plane that President Trump should use until Boeing is finished with a new one.
Right. I mean, what is interesting, the reports around Boeing on this are it's a separate area of discussion, but are interesting. Apparently that, there's problems vetting the people working on this plane. And that's one of the reasons there's a holdup there. Um, but I mean, obviously, the other point of discussion around all of this is that, Qatar is in the Middle East. You and I last had a conversation about appearances of grift and conflict to do with Abu Dhabi, right? To do with a huge deal coming out, $2 billion deal being done by Abu Dhabi using the Trump family's stable coin. And you and I have also talked before about, the way Jared Kushner was, received huge investment from the Saudis right after he left office and when his policies had been very helpful to them. So, I mean, this is, I would argue, variations on a theme. It's probably would you say, the most audacious gesture yet? I mean, to accept because it involves President Trump directly.
It certainly does create the impression that the Qatari government is trying to induce President Trump, to do what they want him to do by offering him a fancy plane because he told everybody he liked the plane. And this creates the appearance of corruption. And we are engaging in this foolishness, right? The middle of Middle East peace negotiations, which are absolutely critical. We've had over 50,000 people killed in Gaza from the latest Middle East war, and there continue to be attacks on Israel. We need to persuade the warring parties to come to the table and negotiate. In Qatar, instead of offering us an airplane that we don't need, should be doing their part to persuade Hamas to back down, disengage from politics in Gaza, and create a Palestinian state that would recognize Israel and live in peace and be recognized by Israel. We've spent tens of billions of dollars in the last 2 years on military aid to Israel alone because of the latest terrorist attacks. And this is a problem we need to have resolved. And that's what the president should be doing, not going shopping for a new airplane.
Well, of course, he's not scheduled to visit Israel this week. And one has to imagine what Bibi Netanyahu, what he must be making of this latest news. I mean, his reaction is unlikely to be positive, right?
I have no idea what the Israelis are going to do. Maybe when Prime Minister Netanyahu comes to Washington, he's going to feel that he needs to bring a gift of his own. Maybe a couple of cases of fine Israeli wine. I don't know. But if the gift is worth more than $480, that's what Congress has permitted in the Foreign Gifts and Decorations Act. Any more than that, Congress is going to have to sign off on gifts. And quite frankly, what we don't need is more airplanes, fancier planes for the president, or bottles of wine or anything. What we need is peace. And we need the warring parties to come together. And countries such as Qatar, they spent so much of their money supporting Hamas, a terrorist organization. They need to rethink their strategy and whether they should reorient towards supporting a Palestinian state that will live in peace with Israel and recognize Israel and be recognized by Israel. That's what we need. We don't need this airplane. And I reiterate, this is humiliating for the United States. I know that countries loan military equipment to other countries in times of great need, and we're doing that with Israel now. We've done that with Ukraine. We during the Second World War, we lent military equipment to Great Britain. But what is this lend-lease to the United States by Qatar? And this makes absolutely no sense.
Right. I mean, ordinarily, it's a sign of the United States' great standing in the world that we are the ones to be lending the equipment or selling it. It's a pretty poor reflection. It's hardly make America great again if we need to borrow a plane
Well, yes,
from a
and we
Middle Eastern
also have
country.
those. Yes, and we have those relationships with democracies. This is not two great world leaders. Franklin Roosevelt, Winston Churchill, meeting on a battleship to talk about what we can do to assist in the war effort. This is a country that I don't care how wealthy Qatar is. They have spent billions of dollars propping up a government in Gaza that is engaged in terrorist attacks on Israel, precipitated a, a horrific war that we need to bring an end to. We need a ceasefire. We need a government that's going to negotiate a ceasefire. That's the job of the president of the United States. Put the pressure on Israel to do their part, put the pressure on Qatar to stop supporting terrorism, and of course, deal with Iran. These are their issues. This is not a time to go airplane shopping.
Well, I'm just going to add, I mean, it's a sidebar, but actually I looked at the video of President Trump discussing the Qatari plane and what he said to the reporter. He quoted a golfer, Sam Snead, and he said, Sam Snead always said, when they give you a putt, you say, thank you very much. Meaning, in other words, you don't look a gift horse in the face. But in fact, I looked this up and Sam Snead did not say that. What Sam Snead actually said was never concede a putt, which is very, very different. Richard, what happens if Donald Trump, true to past form, ignores all of the noise around this and just there is a deal and he starts using the plane?
Well, then Congress would have to investigate what happened and the relationship with the government of Qatar and what was asked for in return, if anything. Could this rise to the level of a bribe? If this is part of a deal, the so-called art of the deal, in working out Middle East peace negotiations, that would be a very, very serious matter. And we just simply don't know. So Congress would have to investigate. And if they thought circumstances warranted, they would impeach the president of the United States. I know that the Republican controlled Congress is probably not about to do that. But this would be a violation of the Constitution if we accept that airplane without authorization from Congress. And another thing that would come up later on, if they go back to the other plan where they were going to simply turn it over to a presidential library after Donald Trump leaves office, we could easily see a subsequent administration going to court, bringing a lawsuit, and repossessing that plane that was unconstitutionally given to Donald Trump, repossessing the plane, and then doing with it what the Department of Defense thinks is appropriate.
Right. Well, I think it's interesting that actually we haven't heard Trump talk about the library and the plane being used for his personal use. So I guess, we'll stand by. This is a developing story. I also want to ask you about something you wrote to me about last week, the Foreign Agents Registration Act, and your concerns about this president's position on that. Can you walk everyone who's joined, walk us through what's happened and what your worries are?
Well, the Foreign Agents Registration Act of 1938 was passed by Congress to identify agents of foreign governments that are operating inside the United States, whether they be German agents or Soviet agents, Japanese agents, Italian agents, or others. Germany, in particular, was engaged in a propaganda campaign throughout the 1930s to convince Americans that the regime under Hitler was actually had peaceful intentions and
I've lost you. Richard, I've lost you. I've lost you. I think people probably can't hear. Oh, you came back. Unfortunately, It said your internet connection is unstable. Would you mind repeating what you just said? Because
Yeah, the Foreign Agents Registration Act of 1938 was passed to keep the foreign countries from trying to influence American politics. And whether it was the Soviets who were infiltrating our government, the communists, or the Germans, the Nazis.
yes.
The Nazis, in particular, were very active in the United States. They had 10,000 people in Madison Square Garden who were gathered to celebrate the Nazi regime while singing patriotic songs with American flags side by side with swastikas. Well, who paid for that? Who paid to organize that in Madison Square Garden? We needed to know. That's the point of the Foreign Agents Registration Act of 1938. And it's a very, very important statute that people register with the Justice Department if they're going to represent foreign interests in the United States, particularly trying to influence public opinion. And the Trump administration says they don't really want to enforce the Foreign Agents Registration Act unless the conduct amounts to espionage. We have other statutes to deal with espionage, but that's not the point here. The point is to find out who in the United States is here trying to influence public opinion on behalf of a foreign government, whether it be people concerned with the Middle East conflict or supportive of Russia or Ukraine or anything. And that's a very, very important statute. I don't know why the Trump administration wants to not enforce it. I know they're very upset about some people in the Trump campaign in 2016 who got caught up in that statute because they didn't register their role as agents for foreign countries, some of the former Soviet black countries, Paul Manafort and others. But we need to move beyond that. This is a vitally important statute, and we need to enforce it.
Very, very, very interesting. When you think of where we are today and where you think of the signaling that this administration has, put out, do you worry that our reputation in the world is irredeemably tarnished, or do you think we can come back?
Well, we can come back, but we need to focus on what we need to do to be a world leader. And that means approaching situations such as the tragedy in the Middle East with what objective in mind, which is the peaceful coexistence of Israel and the Palestinian and also others in the region. So we don't have constant wars, getting Iran not to develop nuclear weapons. There's so much at stake here. And there's not an opportunity to indulge in the opulence that is characteristic of some of the monarchies of the Gulf states, and for a president of the United States to imagine himself living like a king. Uh, he has a job to do, and that's what he should be focusing on, is helping negotiate for peace. And that should be the only deal on the table: peace and security in the Middle East.
And why does it matter? On the flip side, there are people who voted for Donald Trump saying because they feel able to separate style and substance, because they may not like his style, all this opulence, appearing open for business, but they seem to like the substance. Why does it matter if we go round accepting foreign planes? Why does it matter if the Trump sons have got a stable coin being used by the government of Abu Dhabi? Why does any of this matter, in your opinion?
Because nobody will trust us. Nobody will trust the United States that our intentions are to protect ourselves and our allies and also to achieve peace. Nobody will trust us. They will simply think that the United States government is there to support the efforts of the president of the United States to enrich himself and defeat his own ego. and we will be taken advantage of if we could be bought for an airplane. It's an expensive airplane, $400 million, but that pales in comparison with the amount of money we've had to spend the past 2 years alone aiding Israel in the Middle East war, the crisis precipitated by Hamas, which is supported by the government of Qatar. And we have a defense budget now approaching $1 trillion. We cannot continue to spend money this way on a military, getting into wars all over the world. We need to work toward peace, not soliciting bribes and favors from foreign governments or persuading other countries that they shouldn't be making war against each other and they should not support terrorist organizations the way Qatar has supported Hamas, but work toward peace. And that's not what I'm hearing about from the Trump administration. And if they want to shift toward negotiations with the priorities in mind, rather than just enriching the president, feeding the president's ego, well, maybe we may have a good positive result, and the president will deserve commendation for that. But that's not what we're seeing so far.
Indeed not. Richard, thank you very, very much, as always. And as we get more facts around what the negotiations actually are around its plane, hopefully we'll continue talking. There's certainly nothing lacking to talk about as every day goes by in this administration. Thank you, Richard, very, very much for your time.
Well, thank you, Vicky.
Take care.